Welcome back to Blue Jays Focus, the channel dedicated to daily Toronto Blue Jays coverage, breaking down everything happening inside this organization, from the moment the lineup card goes up all the way to the front office decisions and medical updates that shape how this team is going to look week to week throughout what is shaping up to be a very eventful 2026 season. And today, unfortunately, we have a lot of ground to cover on the negative side of the ledger. Pitching depth, injuries, a brutal series loss that raises some real offensive questions, and a Cody Ponce update that the entire fan base has been waiting on. There is a lot here, so let us get straight into it. We are going to start with Angel Perdomo, because this is the move that came out yesterday and almost got buried under everything else that was happening around the club. Perdomo has been returned to the Boston Red Sox organization under Rule 5 rules, and while that transaction might read as a minor footnote to some people, the context surrounding it makes it a much more significant loss than the headline suggests. If you have been following this channel throughout spring training, you already know that Perdomo was not a fringe candidate for this roster. He was not a long-shot arm that Toronto was carrying out of obligation or positional necessity. This was a pitcher who was genuinely, seriously considered to make this team out of camp. Multiple credible reports, including coverage from Ben Nicholson-Smith, made clear that the Blue Jays held Perdomo in very high regard internally. He was in the conversation alongside Chase Lee and ultimately Spencer Miles as the organization worked through its final roster decisions. Toronto chose Miles. That was the call. And as a direct consequence of Perdomo not making the opening day roster, the Rule 5 rules required he be returned to Boston, which is exactly what has now happened. And look, you can understand the decision the Blue Jays made. Spencer Miles was the choice, and there were reasons for that. But the timing of losing Perdomo could not be more uncomfortable, because this is an organization whose pitching depth is already being tested in ways that were not part of the original plan when this season began. Keegan Matheson noted that Perdomo was one of the final cuts in camp, and the Red Sox are understandably delighted to get him back. That reaction alone tells you something about how this pitcher is viewed across the league. You do not get that kind of reception when a marginal arm gets returned. The fact that Boston is thrilled speaks to the caliber of pitcher Toronto just had to send back. Now let us put Perdomo's departure in its proper context, because this is where the depth conversation gets genuinely concerning. Mason Ford has already been asked to pitch 4 games across 5 nights. Lázaro Estrada was called up and is being deployed in a role that carries real weight. Spencer Miles, who was always projected to ease into his big league life gradually, is already being pushed into higher leverage situations than anyone anticipated at this stage of the season. The workload is accelerating faster than the front office would have drawn it up, and losing an arm like Perdomo, who could have provided length and flexibility in exactly these kinds of situations, is a real blow to an already stretched group. It is worth acknowledging that Toronto did sign Austin Booth a couple of days ago, which adds a body to the organizational depth chart. But Booth's addition and Perdomo's departure are not a straight exchange of equivalent value, and the overall picture of what this pitching staff looks like right now versus what it was supposed to look like in April is meaningfully different from the original projection. The margin for error in this rotation and bullpen is thinning, and it is only the early portion of the season. Which brings us directly to Cody Ponce and the update that everyone has been waiting on. Ponce has been placed on the 15-day injured list, with the corresponding roster move being the promotion of Lázaro Estrada. That much was already known. What we now have is more clarity, or at least the beginning of more clarity, on what the next steps look like. Ponce is scheduled to see Dr. Neil Elatrach next Monday, one of the most respected orthopedic surgeons in professional sports, to determine the appropriate course of treatment for the ACL sprain in his right knee. The critical decision that comes out of that consultation is whether Ponce will pursue a surgical path or attempt to manage this through a structured rehabilitation program. John Schneider addressed it directly, and the honest reality is that the organization does not yet have a definitive answer. The fact that they are still in the evaluation stage, still gathering information before committing to a treatment plan, is actually not the worst possible news, even though it creates uncertainty in the short term. If the ACL were clearly and completely torn, surgery would already be scheduled and the timeline would be set. The fact that they are bringing in another specialist to make a final call suggests there may be some ambiguity about the severity of the injury, and ambiguity in this context is marginally better than absolute clarity in the wrong direction. That said, even in the best-case rehabilitation scenario, Ponce is going to miss significant time, and planning around his absence rather than hoping for a quick return is the responsible organizational posture right now. The 15-day IL designation is almost certainly a placeholder. Depending on what Dr. Alatrice concludes after Monday's evaluation, there is a real possibility that Ponce gets transferred to the 60-day injured list, which would remove him from roster considerations for an extended period and also open up a 40-man roster spot for the front office to work with. Keep an eye on that. The move from 15-day to 60-day would be a signal about how serious the organization believes this injury to be. With Ponce's timeline uncertain and the rotation already managing multiple absences, the question of who starts on Sunday has become the most pressing logistical puzzle on Schneider's desk right now. John Morosi reported that one scenario being discussed internally is a bullpen game on Sunday in Chicago, followed by Max Scherzer, Kevin Gausman, and Dylan Cease taking the 3 games of the upcoming Dodgers series. That rotation alignment for the Dodgers is essentially confirmed at this point, and it makes complete sense given the magnitude of that series and the caliber of opposition. You want your best 3 starters lined up for that matchup, and Scherzer, Gausman, and Cease is as formidable a 3-game rotation as anyone in baseball can deploy. But Sunday remains an open question. A bullpen game is one option, and the arms are theoretically available. Ryan Burr has looked solid in his recent outings. Trevor Richards has provided quality length at points this season. Lewis Varland has a day of rest built in. Spencer Miles could contribute multiple innings if managed carefully. The pieces exist for a bullpen game to be constructed. The problem is that burning through those arms in a patchwork start this early in the season creates downstream consequences that do not show up until weeks later when you need those same pitchers for back-to-back high-leverage situations. The Blue Jays have gone to the bullpen game well before and paid for it over the summer when accumulated workloads caught up with the staff. It is a legitimate concern and one worth weighing carefully against the alternatives. The more appealing alternative, and the one that this channel would advocate for, is a call-up, specifically C.J. Van Eyck. Van Eyck has been in the Blue Jays organization since 2022, a long-tenured prospect who has navigated injuries and development hurdles throughout his time in the system. He made his Triple-A debut with the Buffalo Bisons recently and delivered a genuinely promising performance, going 4 innings, striking out 5, walking 1, and allowing a single earned run. Those are not flashy numbers, but the performance was clean and controlled, which is exactly what you want to see from a starting pitcher making his first impression at the Triple-A level. Mitch Bannon noted Van Eyck as one of the legitimate options to fill Ponce's rotation spot in the short term, and the fact that his name is appearing in credible reporting circles suggests the organization is actively considering him. The depth at Triple-A for starting pitching is genuinely thin right now. Adam Macko is there, but the organization appears committed to managing his development carefully rather than accelerating his timeline in response to big league roster stress. Beyond Macko and Van Eyck, and with Estrada already promoted, the options become limited quickly. That context makes Van Eyck not just an interesting name, but potentially the most practical solution available to Toronto right now. A call-up that gives him a starting opportunity on Sunday, keeps the bullpen intact for the week ahead, and allows the organization to evaluate what they have in him at the major league level simultaneously. There is real logic to that path. Schneider also noted that the Sunday decision remains contingent on whether Estrada is needed in relief before then. If Estrada is deployed out of the bullpen in the interim, the calculus for Sunday changes and the options narrow further. These are the kinds of cascading roster decisions that become very complicated very quickly when your depth chart is already stretched, and it is why the Perdomo loss stings as much as it does in this particular moment. Now let us address the game yesterday, because the series result against the Colorado Rockies deserves honest discussion, even as we acknowledge that 6 games into a 162-game season is an extremely limited sample from which to draw firm conclusions. Losing a series to Colorado is not acceptable regardless of the circumstances, and nobody in that organization is going to pretend otherwise. But the particular frustration of yesterday's loss was watching Kevin Gausman deliver one of the most dominant individual pitching performances of the early season and walk away without a win. 2 hits allowed, 10 strikeouts. Gausman was absolutely masterful, the kind of outing that reminds you why Toronto has one of the best starting pitchers in the American League anchoring this rotation, and the offense could not get him a run. The inability to capitalize with runners in scoring position has been a recurring theme through these first 6 games, and it is the kind of thing that gets magnified quickly when it costs you a game behind a performance like that. Toronto was supposed to be one of the better contact-oriented lineups in baseball this season. The early results have not reflected that identity. Too many strikeouts, too many men left on base, too many situations where the lineup needed to string something together and came up empty. Schneider addressed it after the game with characteristic composure, acknowledging that these things will correct themselves over the course of a long season, and he is right about that. 4 wins and 2 losses through 6 games is still a strong start. The Yankees are 5-1, but they have also played considerably tougher competition to this point, so the standings context matters. The concern is not the record, the concern is the pattern, and the pattern right now is a lineup that is not doing the things it is capable of doing in the situations that matter most. That will change. The talent is there. But it needs to change soon because the schedule is about to get significantly more demanding, and the pitching staff is going to need run support to get through it. There is also a broader conversation worth having around Kevin Gausman specifically, because performances like yesterday do not happen in a vacuum, and they should not be allowed to pass without acknowledgement of what they mean for this organization going forward. Gausman has been one of the most consistent and reliable starting pitchers in the American League for several seasons now, and he has done it in Toronto with a level of professionalism and competitive intensity that embodies exactly what this franchise is trying to build. The conversation about extending him is one that the front office needs to be having seriously and urgently. A pitcher of his caliber, at this stage of his career, delivering masterclass performances in a Blue Jays uniform is exactly the kind of player you build long-term plans around. Get that extension done. The Cody Ponce consultation with Dr. Alatrech next Monday is the most important event on the Blue Jays' schedule this week, and it has nothing to do with anything that happens on the field. That evaluation will determine the trajectory of the rotation for potentially the next several months. Whatever the conclusion, this channel will have full coverage and break it down the moment information becomes available. The Blue Jays are 4-2. The rotation is being tested. The offense has room to grow into itself. And the front office is making decisions in real time under genuine pressure. This is the part of the season where organizational depth and adaptability get exposed, and how Toronto navigates the next 2 weeks will tell us a great deal about what kind of team they actually are in 2026. Stay with us every step of the way. That is going to do it for today here on Blue Jays Focus. Stay locked in, keep watching, and we will see you in the next one.
Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.